That's probably better. Hey, it's almost 7 o'clock. We're starting a little 2 minutes early. I can see a bunch of people are already here. What's up? How are you guys doing? If you haven't taken a look, make sure to take a look. I'm sure all you guys have, because you guys are loyal listeners. First-time callers, first-time listener. I know that you guys probably have taken a look, but the video is up on the exhaust test. So let me know what you guys thought about the exhaust test running on the 4.8 liter with the Cadillac Supercharger, which, by the way, is no longer a viable low buck option thanks to the Holdner tax. I can't believe how much people have jacked those prices up. I don't even really see it because I'm not out on eBay trying to price these things or anything. But I just get reports from people back when they're making comments that immediately after the first video posted, guys just started going crazy on the pricing on the blowers. Obviously, the adapters themselves are not cheap, but now the blowers are not cheap. So it makes people look at obviously other options. What I'm hoping is that when all of this chaos goes down, just like with the GameStop stuff, that the price will come back down to a more realistic level, and then people will be able to get that blower and put adapters on. Obviously, there are other choices. You can get a torque storm centrifugal, completely different power curve than this kind of blower, an LSA. Although a lot of guys are saying about the LSA, I honestly don't think you could put together an LSA combination for what you could put together on this when the blowers were at their like more realistic price. When I bought mine, I think we bought it for $300 or $350 or something. It was much more reasonable. Now that's not the case. Some guys are telling me that they've seen them for over $1,000, like $1,100 or $1,200, which just basically makes it ridiculous. I mean, it is really cool. It is a supercharger, and it is it has the fuel rail and stuff, and it has the throttle opening, and has an intercooler. It has lots of cool stuff. But still, it was nice that they were being sold for a few $100s, and that made it kind of a viable option. Yes, Brian, hydration is the key to success. What would you do before you started streaming live videos? Well, I actually just got back from my wife and I we went and exercised. I don't know if you're talking about today or just in general, but we went up hiking took the dogs up on the hills and stuff so we could go run around and let them be dogs, and they could run around and we could get exercise and get outside for a while because it was beautiful today. It was 65 or 70 degrees here, so it was really nice. And you're right, Tim. It is a free market, and I try to explain that to the guys from Mac Daddy Parts are concerned that they're not in control of what everybody else is pricing these blowers at, and they want everybody to know that they're not part of that, obviously, and obviously neither am I. I don't have any of these blowers, although I wish I would have bought like 700 or 800 of those blowers before we did the video, but that's not me, and I wouldn't have anywhere near that kind of money anyways. But it's not those guys, and they're disappointed that this happened, obviously. And I told them, just wait, the price will probably come back down, and guys will want to do it because they're just trying to make a fast buck because there's all kinds of popularity right now. But that being said, this is America, and this is the home of capitalism, and this is the home of supply and demand. I know I studied economics, so when there's lots and lots of demand, you change the price accordingly, and people are doing what they're doing, and there's really nothing that you can do about it, unfortunately. Okay, Captain, let's see. Quick question on a 6-liter Vortec with a Roots 871. How hard would it be to hit 1,000 horsepower? An 871 is size so it can do 1,000 horsepower. On a 6-liter, it's going to be a little bit harder because the combination of a Roots blower not wanting to run at really high boost levels, and if you had an intercooler, it would be good. I would recommend 2 things if you're going to do that. Make the 6-liter as powerful as you can. Put good heads on it, put a good camshaft in it, and make it a really strong naturally aspirated motor. And if you're going to run it carbureted on top of the 871, which you should, because if you put fuel injectors underneath, you need to lubricate the blower. So it has to have fuel going through the top of it. So however you have fuel supplying through the top of it, make it be E85. It will be a lot happier on E85 or methanol if you can use that. You'll get a lot more power. I did not measure the blower and intercooler assembly, and I forgot to ask the guys. I was talking to the guys from Mac Daddy Parts this morning, and I have another video coming up on a series of videos coming up on another like homemade blower adapter kind of thing, which I'll probably ruin that market too. Yeah, the adapters are expensive. The one thing I could say is I can see now in looking at those adapters, because I was going to do that. I was just going to make some quickie Richie adapters, and I can see now why there's no way I would have ever been able to do that. These are really, really nice, and like I said, it makes a viable option to put that blower on. I wish I had that blower looking at the boost response and the torque curve and all that stuff. I wish I had that in a truck. It would be really awesome to have that, and that it did that on a 4.8. You know, if we were making almost 600 foot-pounds of torque, so it's kind of nice to have that available on a truck application. It's pretty cool. Are you going to do a build video on the best torque combination? Yeah, we're going to do some 6-liter stuff on how to just build low-speed torque. Stuff that's 5,000 and below would be kind of the goal. Yeah, Roy, the adapter guys are really great guys, and I can tell you that when I had the conversation with them, I asked them why they did that. I said, look, most of these blowers are probably already sold, and you're building something for a dwindling market. Most people don't do that. You build something where you think the market is going to continue for a long time. They knew going in that it wasn't going to. There are a limited number of blowers out there. Guys are using them for other stuff. So we're going to make adapters. And the guy just wanted to do that because he's a car guy. And he said, look, I wanted to build something, and I wanted to do this so that guys could use it. And I wanted to do it. So it was something that I felt passionate about. So he stepped up and did all of the, and you know, it's not cheap and it's not easy. And he just wanted to get it done. So he did get it done. And so it was impressive that he decided he was going to make it and went through all of the steps, because it's a lot of work, and got it done and brought the part to market. And he contacted me and said, hey, will you test these? And I wanted to, because I wanted to do that test anyway with the blower I had bought. Unfortunately, I sold it knowing that I would never be able to make adapters, because it was just off so far. And mine was actually going to be even easier. I was just going to bolt it on a big box that I was going to put on top of a high ram. So the runner length of the blower would have been ineffective. It would have just blown into a big common plenum and then into the runners and the high ram. So it would have had ultimately similar runner length, but it just would have been, you know, monstrously tall with a blower and an intercooler and then the high ram and all that. So it would have been like Freiberger did on the big block when they ran the blower and an intercooler on top of a high ram. So it's, you know, you got like 9 feet of stack going on there, but it works well because blowers and runner length go good together. Yeah, 2 in a row, Rye. What's up? Chris wants to see 8.2 deck small block forward adapters. Somebody else was asking. The other thing that they were talking about actually were Hemi adapters too, and I'd like to see them on a Gen 3 Hemi, because the Gen 3 Hemi stuff is, at least the early stuff, is becoming more and more affordable, and those motors obviously, like every motor, like boost as well too. Yeah, Julius, I want to see a draw through carburetor too. I was talking to Tim about that last night, about how long he thought a GT45 turbo would last as a draw through. He said he thought it might smoke. I want to try it just because I don't, you know, if it's a $163 turbo, we don't really care about that. So I'll try that and see. And again, I'm disappointed that the guys from Banks didn't step up and get me one of those draw-through turbos. I'm sure that they had to have had like 100 of those sitting around. So Gail, if you're out there and you're watching, or one of your guys are watching, try to find some of those old Ray J turbos, and let's see if we can do a blow-through deal. Yeah, Roy, they're like I said, those guys from Mac Daddy Parts are just really good guys. They're just car guys. They're just like everybody else. They wanted to do something really cool. Yamil, what's going on? Have you run gapless total seal rings? I have. I've run those before in an NA motor. As a matter of fact, I ran those in my Engine Masters motor, if I remember right. I think we did try those. I haven't run those on a boosted application. And a vacuum pump can add to it. Depends on the tension of the rings that you're using. More than anything. Sometimes when we run vacuum pumps on them, we don't see much of a gain, but they will if depending on what you've done with your ring pack. Usually the lighter the ring pack, the more the gain you get from the vacuum pump. Brule has actually done more of that kind of testing than I have, but I would make sure that even the gapless rings have enough gap, because a lot of people don't realize that the rings don't butt together, they overlap. So, but I think that there's a stop on the overlap. So make sure you have enough gap. Those have to grow also. Yeah, the 4.8 with an Robert, the 4.8 with an LSA would be cool. Matt has one on his what the heck is that? It's a little Nissan or something, and that he swapped the motor into, and that thing's nice. And it, you know, 4.8 needs torque, so having that positive displacement blower definitely helps. Richard, what are your thoughts on automotive aftermarket being affected by the latest EPA activities? I'm not up on what they're doing. I'm actually not as involved maybe or knowledgeable as I should be on that stuff. I haven't seen what they're doing. Yeah, his Ian, that's right. He's got a G35. Okay, Tim said he used one. I was wondering, you know, I was just going to do something cheap, either a diesel turbo from the wrecking yard, which I hope I can find one of those, or I'm sacrificing one of the GT45s. It would be fine. Let me know if you guys would like to see. I talked to the guys at Max Speeding about doing a shout or a comparison between the inexpensive GT35 82 turbo as twins on an LS and the 3076R turbo. So both of those are kind of viable options. For the G35 would go to 1,000 horsepower if you had twins, and the 3076 I think was another option I'd like to explore for a lower power thing. And I've run I think I've run both of those as singles before, but not as twins on an LS. So let me know if you guys would like to see that sort of twin shootout to find out. And they're both inexpensive, so it would be kind of a low buck deal. So it'd be kind of cool. Julius, the Coyote intake manifolds, I think, fit the 544 valve stuff, but with adapters. Adam wants to know any thoughts on the Howard's ASA cam and 5.3. I don't know what those specs are on the Howard's ASA cam. I've seen the ASA cam. As a matter of fact, we'll be using one of those on a. I think that's the cam in Finnegan's motor that we're doing the twin turbo deal on. Xmoto, hey Richard, I just got done with my 462 valve build, forged crank rods, pistons, ported PI heads. All that's a good start. Bigger valves, comp cam, stage 3, valve springs, forged shorty headers. Okay. 60-pound injectors, 15 psi, 575 at the wheel. What is it? A turbo motor that you're running 15 psi, or is it a supercharger? Scuba Sam, sad news. My OQ4 showed up and it was broke. Should I stay 6.0 or go to a 5.3? I want 500-ish in my 72 K10. Will be NA to get it running, then budget turbo. A 5.3 with a turbo will easily do 500. As a matter of fact, it's going to easily do 500 at the tire. Even a bone stock, I've run lots of bone stock 5.3s just with springs usually in them and injectors, and then we put a turbo on them, and about 10 or 11 pounds, they're going to make 600, and which is going to be a 500 at the tire. And they make that much torque. They don't want to rev really high because they don't have any camshaft in them. And they would make more power at that same boost with a camshaft in it. As a matter of fact, they'd make about another 140 or 150 horsepower with a cam at that same boost. But on the stock stuff, the boost response is pretty good, and you size the turbo right, and the stock cam obviously idles like a stock cam and it drives like a stock cam, but you just have lots more horsepower and torque. So that's actually kind of a fun combination if you're just driving it around. Obviously, if you want to rev it and you want it to make more power at whatever boost level, then any kind of cam is going to help you out. 660 crank, does that power seem about right? Thanks, Robert. I can tell you we ran that boost level seems about right. When we ran the Vortex stuff and the Kenny Bell stuff, I think that we were up near 13 or 14 pounds with the Vortex on our modified PI, non-PI kind of hybrid. It had ported heads, it had cams in it. We had a PI intake manifold when we ran the Vortex, and we had the Kenny Bell intake, obviously, when we ran the Kenny Bell. And that's where I think we were. I think we were 650 or 660 or so at the crank. Tim wants to see the test on the turbos on the 3800 Series 2. Twin 3076 is not a bad size for it. Yeah, that could be possible. I wasn't planning on running twins on the 3800, but there's no reason that we can't. Julius, don't let anybody else here tell you otherwise. Nobody's going to do that. We're a non-otherwise zone. How does simple mods, how does taper intake runners affect power and torque? Long runners, large diameter taping down into the head. A couple of things can happen with taper. One, taper changes the total volume of the given length. If it's the same if it's the same size all the way through, and then if you taper it, it's obviously going to be, the volume is going to be less than if it were all the big size, and it's going to be bigger if it were all the small size. It doesn't change the length, so the reflected wave is still the same. It can accelerate the air, but it also changes Helmholtz resonance. So it has a few changes that you need to test. Xmoto V2 with front mount air to air. I want to make 650 at the tire. What can I do to up that? Yeah, E85 would be what I would recommend there. The other thing that you want to look at is, if you have a front mount, you're okay. I was going to say, if you have the aftercooler, the Vortex cells for that 2-valve deal, that's not big enough for what you're doing. We saw a big drop in going to the single core that the aftercooler core that they make. We tested one on a 302 and a 351 and the 462 valve. We put 2 of them together on the 462 valve when we were trying to make more power and put a bigger opening and all that, because that single brick that they sell is not big enough. If you've got a big air to air, maybe measure the drop and see what that is across the core, because sometimes that can be a lot. And then definitely run E85. Any preferred tools for notching pistons? The last time I notched pistons, which was on the L99, I just used a Dremel. I have also used the Isky valve cutter that you put in the head and put the head on and then spin it with a drill and make sure that the piston is in the right position, by the way, when you do that. And that works very well. Also, lots of other guys have made their own stuff. They take a valve that they don't care about and they weld things on it, or they put sandpaper on it, or they put little cutters on it. There's lots of ways to do it. You don't really have to notch very much. You'd be surprised if you actually have the piston in at the point where it's contacting the valve, and then you put the head on. You don't have to cut very much away to get the required piston to valve clearance. Drew wants to know, what about LSA stuff? I would love to test LSA stuff. I just don't have an LSA kit, and I'm not going to go buy one. I can't afford to go buy one to test it. So if somebody had one that they could let me run, that would be fine. But I don't have one. Like the guys with this Cadillac blower, they just sent it to me and said, hey, we'll supply you this if you want to do tests with it, and then I'm just going to give it back to them. And I'm perfectly happy with that. If somebody wants to supply something that I can test, that's great. The guys from TA Performance sent me heads to test, and I'm just going to give all that stuff back to them. Obviously, went out to see the guys at the Cadillac place, and they let me run a bunch of stuff. So all of that works out very well, because quite honestly, I don't want any of these parts. I need to get rid of some of the stuff that I have. JD Rods, I'm very familiar with David Weishart. I've spoken with him a few times. He's a really sharp guy. If so, what's your take, I'm sure is what you're asking, on his 289 head porting? I don't know what that is. I haven't read specifically about the 289 head porting. Sonny wants to know, can you run E85 and methanol and see how much more power you can get? Doing a 406 with a 671 blower, what do you recommend for CFM for the throttle body? Are you, first of all, Jones 514, if you're running a 671, are you putting a throttle body on top that's just flowing air? If you are, that's not a good idea. You have to have fuel going through the blower. Otherwise, you're going to burn the rotors out of it. Something that Gale Banks found when he was running the Supercharger on their diesel and not putting fuel through it. Now, Gale knows that because he's Gale, but they tried doing it anyway, but the blower didn't last very long. You have to have fuel or something going through there too. So if you're feeding, we always like running 2, and I like running 2 carburetors or 2 throttle bodies that inject fuel. And that would be one application where I don't mind running the throttle body injection. Run a pair of them. I would make them big. So normally we'll run at least 750s on a 671, and a lot of times we run 950s on them. Have you done any testing using the FST carburetor? I think so. Tapered runners flow more. I don't think I agree with that. And it depends on when it's discussion with people. They're like, yeah, tapered runner flows more. And I'm like, okay, so what size are we starting with? Well, they're talking about having the taper being the end of the taper being the same diameter as the constant piece. I'm like, yeah, but that makes it smaller. That makes the straight pipe smaller. So make the straight pipe the same size as the big end of the taper. And I don't think you'll have more flow from a tapered pipe. I could be wrong, but I don't think that will happen. Drew wants to know injector size, stock bottom end, LS1, 224 cam, stock 243 heads, LSA supercharger. Put 80s in it so that you have enough, and then, you know, that way you can run E85 in it, or something even bigger. Because I've heard of guys making some really big power with that LSA supercharger. I don't know if it's true or not because I've never run one. Julius, I'd be interested to see what happens if you ran the Cobra Jet intake manifold, because it's fairly long runner. The Boss 290, I don't think was terribly long, if I remember right. John wants to know, what do you recommend for LS swap wiring harness? I'm looking at a 5.3 from a 2001 10 going into my 56 Holiday, kind of a low butt cruiser. I'm actually the wrong guy to ask about wiring harness. The only stuff we ever run that I ever run on the dyno is a Holly, and it has a dedicated harness obviously for that. I've never swapped one of these motors into a car, so Matt might be a better guy to ask on that stuff. I don't know if guys run the whole factory harness, and if you're running a factory ECU, then obviously they do that. Otherwise, I don't know if guys do painless or some other kind of wiring harness. I just have never done that, so I probably would be the wrong guy to ask. Joan says the customer wants to run two 950 throttle bodies, and I think that that's way too much. The thing is, you can't over CFM the inlet side of a positive displacement supercharger. Nothing's going to happen other than possibly when you crack the throttle, it's going to be overly responsive. But it can't lose any power. It can't lose low speed power, can't lose mid range, and it can't lose top end from having more throttle opening on the top of that supercharger. Nothing's going to happen other than, like I said, it's going to be touchy getting into the throttle, but that would be the only problem. And Julius, yeah, a pair of 750s would probably be enough. It depends on, but if you're trying to do 1,000 horsepower with that, then I would do two 950s. MRM, Mr. Miscast, how much testing have you done with coatings? I've only run coated stuff sometimes, but I haven't ever done back-to-back tests on coated pistons or coated heads or coated the inside of a turbo housing or an exhaust or anything like that. I haven't done that stuff. I haven't done a back-to-back test on the coating. Jeff's in the house. FFH is a second ring gap of 35 too much. If you saw what the gap was on the Big Bang stuff, you wouldn't ask that question. When I did those, it was a go, no go kind of thing. And 35 was certainly, there were a lot of them at that. I have one LS camshaft for sale. It's a small, mild cam, and unfortunately I don't have it with me. I have also an Innovate air fuel gauge, which is really cool because we've used it on the engine dyno a lot, and it would be perfect to put in a car. So it's one of the, I'll have to get the part number stuff. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow and find out if you guys want it. And I've got a set of, if there are any 5 liter Ford guys, I have some bolt down 1.6 roller rocker. So if a guy has stock heads, like he has GT40 heads that he went to the wrecking yard and got, which everybody should, or stock E7TE heads that have that need a bolt down roller rocker, I have those. I have the NFA air fuel gauge, and then I have the small LS cam. I think it's a 206, 212, if I remember right. So if anybody's looking for a daily driver kind of thing, that's probably a good choice. And I'll put my email address so you guys can contact me and I can give you the information. Hey, Richard, any tips on mounting an alternator backwards? We have done that and we've run them. The problem is they don't seem to last nearly as long. I don't know if they develop a wear pattern in them because we've had to do reverse alternators when we've mounted blower assemblies, when we've done custom stuff. And the only way to do it was to get the alternator out of the way and turn it around and have it facing the blower. And we've done that. But the alternators, we've had the alternators go out prematurely. And without like a longevity test or a durability test, maybe that alternator was going to go out anyway, but it seemed like it went out, you know, to 8,000 or 10,000 miles after we had done this install. So again, you could take that for what it's worth. I don't know if it was going to go out or if it did because we reversed it, but that's what happened. Yeah, right. That's the difficulty. That's why when I do the a tapered runner is going to change the power minimally. The length of the runner is going to change it a lot. That's why when I make it, two reasons. I make it adjustable with length because that makes a big change in the power curve. The other reason I make it a straight tube is it's much easier to find. It's hard to find different taper ratios, and I would want to be at like a 7 degree, which is kind of optimum. But you know, that's really hard to do. That's really hard testing to do. It's much easier to do to model it on a computer and then build it for a specific application, which is what all the OEMs do, and then have it be for that one thing. But then what happens if we change the cam? What happens if we change the ported heads? You know, what happens if we do a lot of things that make that intake now not optimized? But as we've seen with a lot of these cases, a truck manifold or a Trailblazer SS or a Fast or other manifolds work well on a lot of different kinds of combinations. Nick wants to know if an X-pipe after twin turbos is worth anything. I don't know. I don't think that it should be, because I don't think that if we have some sort of wave coming from an X-pipe, I don't think it's going to get back past the turbos to produce any scavenging. But I could be wrong. Maybe something else is going on in the exhaust, which would help the exhaust flow from the turbo out. I don't know. It might be an interesting test. So the runners are 13 inches long with a cross section of almost 2 inches. Okay. So 13 inches is fairly long. I see people, Ian says, I see people saying the big benefits of ethanol and after E60. I've stuff too, but I've not tested lower concentrations. Jones says 1,000 horsepower is a goal. Then you should put big throttle bodies on it, and then measure the vacuum between the throttle body. If you put two 950s on it or 2,000 CFM throttle bodies, and then measure the vacuum in between the throttle body and the blower, you shouldn't see any. You don't want to see any. Yeah, Richard is absolutely correct about not too much CFM, but for the street, it could be a handful. And I can tell you, this goes back to not just a 671, but anything. I put a big 65 millimeter throttle body on my Ford Focus, and you could tell it made a dramatic difference. And that's why everybody wanted to put it on there. We had to port the opening of the throttle body. But when you put a 65 millimeter throttle body on and you crack the throttle, the thing feels really fast. Of course, at wide open throttle, it doesn't make a lot more power, but subjectively, it feels faster because the amount of airflow that you're allowing in relative to the throttle angle change is a lot when you put a bigger throttle body on there. And this was especially the case when we put a Jackson Racing Supercharger on the same thing, although it was magnified, because when you had a big throttle opening and you open that up, you get lots of power. So it felt really faster, but it's not a lot faster than having the smaller throttle body on there. Have you ever tested a wastegate to limit boost on a Procharger setup? Yeah, the guys from Real Time Racing, P.D. Cunningham, when they ran their NSX, they ran a Vortec on it, and that's what they did. They spun the blower to get more response down low, and then they regulated boost by they tried it with the blow-off valve. I think they ended up doing it with the wastegate, so that they limited boost at whatever. They just wanted to get to whatever that, let's say it was 10 pounds. They just wanted to get to that 10 pounds faster. They wanted the centrifugal to be more like a positive displacement supercharger and ramp up quicker. Jason, I don't have any 1.7s. These are 1.6s. A hot mess. I have 4 roller rockers for bolt downs, 1.6s. I have a small LS cam, and then I have an Innovate air fuel meter. LS 6-liter turbo build, best to go with GT35s or GT45s. It depends on how much power you want. GT35s will take you to about 1,000, and GT45s will take you past that. Any experience with testing long tubes versus tuned length headers? Aren't those the same thing? Yeah, Racer, they brought up an interesting point. There's no cooling when running the running the alternator reverse. We didn't run the alternator reverse because we backside looped it, so it was spinning in the right direction. But, oh no, we didn't do that. Then it wouldn't have been running the different direction. I take that back. You're right. We probably weren't cooling it. I was thinking we got all tricky and looped it around and put a flat pulley on it or something, but I don't remember doing that. Jose, what's up? No small block Chevy stuff. Although this L99, there might be extra parts from that when I take it apart. Does anybody have any advice for Admiral on the Detroit diesel turbos? I'm not too familiar with those. Most of my stuff comes from the wrecking yard, so it'd come from the Cumming stuff and the Chevy and Ford diesels. Yeah, Karen says twin HX35s off the Dodge diesels. Nathan says, I got my 122 blower in the mail today, trying to figure out exactly what injector type I need. You just need to measure the length is the kind of the critical thing. Sean says for a street car, it's all about how it feels. That's why so many guys like the tune port stuff, because you stomp on the gas and it feels really, really impressive, and then it kind of just doesn't deliver on the top end. The wastegated superchargers are loud. Potato, what would your ideal horsepower for daily driving? I like small vehicles. I honestly don't like driving trucks, and I don't like big cars. Like that's the one thing I don't like about all the modern muscle cars is they're really big and heavy. I would much rather have an original Hemi Cuda. Again, not that I can afford that, but a 318 Cuda than I would one of the modern ones. But they're much safer and they're very, very fast because they have a lot of power. But I like small cars. That's why I liked my Honda Civic and my little Sprint Turbo so much. I really like BMW Isettas and those kinds of things. And then you don't have to have a lot of power to make it, be a lot of fun. Like I really like the Nash Metropolitan, and I'd like to have a cool little twin cam Toyota 4-cylinder in that. But my 5-liter Mustang, I really like that too, and that's kind of small too, compared to a new Coyote. I'm sure that the Fox Mustang weighs a lot less than a Coyote. Fastest pendant, wouldn't it make more sense to throttle the supercharger rather than dump it? That's what all the blower guys recommend. When we talk to the guys at Vortec and Paxton, and I'm sure that Procharger is the same way. And as a matter of fact, Paxton on their Novi 2000 stuff used to supply a restrictor on the inlet side that you needed to run to keep the boost down. And they're saying that that's a lot better for the blower rather than bleeding off that excess airflow. So you can restrict it, and it will kind of have the same effect. You just have to be really good about that. I remember we designed the supercharger kit for the Maxima that Stillen was selling. So we designed that kit, and they wanted a certain power level, and we put the blower on, and we put the biggest blower pulley basically on it that we could have, and that we had room for. And it was making too much power, so we restricted it down by trying different air filters on it. And the way that we did it when we were testing is we put the air filter on, and then we just started putting tape around the air filter, and pretty soon the opening in the filter was about this big. And when we would run it on the dyno, it would just collapse the air filter and suck the air filter closed. But we had to keep limiting it because it was making too much power. When we took them for a ride in it, we took the stuff off and said, "Here's what you would get," and they're like, "Yeah, that's way too fast. People are gonna like crash that." But it was a lot of fun, and it was cool to see what would happen when you restrict the airflow into the supercharger. Yes, and innovate wideband. Let's see, Eric, any guess at the ballpark output might be on a 383 stroker with TFS 220s, which are good heads, 26 cc dish, 228, 224, 118 plus 4. You got a cam on there? Oh, okay, that's why you have a Whipple on there. So the motor's going to make, I don't know, let's say 228 cam. Let's say 510 or 520. And then a Whipple 8 or 10 pounds. I think that you're going to be in the 675 range or so, maybe 700. How many pounds of boost can I run on a stock bottom end, stock ring gap with an LSA? 9. I might as well just arbitrarily make something up because that's all we would be doing. You don't know because you don't know what that ring gap is. Is that stock ring gap 14? Is it 13? Is it 20? You just don't know what that is. That's the problem. Joel, is there any chance you might try a 180-degree header? I'm not going to make them. If somebody has some, then we could try. And the problem is the 180-degree headers have to face forward on the dyno because they wouldn't be able to face backward. So we would have to mount them so that they face forward and then loop the rest of the exhaust around it. So it would be a little bit of work. Not that we couldn't do it, but maybe one of the off-road guys that use the sand buggies would let us try one of those. Either a 180-degree header or the 8-into-1 is also the one that I want to try. You should do an intercooled M122 on a 485-360. That's what we just did. The four tests that I just ran were all on an M122. A Pontiac Fiero with an LNF Ecotech. There is a guy that has an Ecotech that brings his Fiero into Westech. It's an NA motor. It's not a turbo motor or a blower motor. But it sounds really good, and this guy wins races in it, so it's pretty cool. Factory Ford XR6T turbos are a dime a dozen in Australia, cheap and easy. Oh, good for 600 each, Julie. So that would make good power. Do we have any spark plug ranges? When we run high boost on stuff, if we run low boost, like with this thing, I would put 8s in it. But if we run high boost, it's going to be a 9 or a 10. Rye wants me to build a K-swap Metropolitan so that I can do wheelies in it. I don't want a K-swap in that. I want a K-swap actually in something else that I may talk about later on. But in a Metropolitan, what I would want would be a 1.6 Toyota twin cam motor. What's better, a turbo or a Procharger? Depends on what you want to do. Take a look at the video that I have up on the modular Ford where we ran a centrifugal, roots blower, a twin screw, and turbos, and you can see the different power curves. You can see what they all do. So one form is not inherently better than the other. They all do different things. That's why they all still exist. Because if one was really so much better than everything else, that would be the only one that existed, and that's not the case. What blower would you recommend for a stock bottom end 6.2 crew cab for quarter mile? If you're choosing a blower, and just choose one that makes the power output that you want, like for instance, the Procharger F1A94 is good for 12 or 100 or more horsepower. And it works really good. We've run that a lot. If you want to run, something that there are blowers that are much bigger than that, can make even more power. So choose a blower according to what kind of power you want to run. Sketch City Garage, about an 88 96 turbo a while back for plans on a 6-liter. That's going to be a healthy turbo. Ended up building a $150 4.8. Do you think it'll ever spool it? Yes, it will. Just all you have to do is add 100 shot, and it will spool that thing right up. It'll be plenty happy. Would you recommend a deadheaded fuel system, or just go for a continuous flowing for a carbureted 351? Normally, you would have some kind of regulator, and the regulator, for carbureted stuff, sometimes they just deadhead it. You can do it either way, and they both work. It just depends on whether you want to run another line back into the tank. If I was to gap the rings for future boost, how is it NA? It's fine. It doesn't seem to affect the power output. When we got the rings on all the big bang motors, it didn't change the power. Richard, can I use a stock torque yield bolts on my 5.3, 11 pounds, or do I have to use head stud kits? You can. We've reused the factory bolts a lot, both on the bottom end and on the head bolts, and we've run boost on them, and it's worked. When I run boost on something, I like to run ARP head studs on it. It just gives me a feeling of security. Gives me a warm fuzzy. When the border opens, I can put you in a Mazda Speed AZ1 Beck 550 Spider. That's kind of cool. 3rd gen K-swap, Toyota MR2, TVR Chimera 4.0, yeah. Early Viper GTS. Those are all kind of cool. Stepped header testing is cool, but it's not. I haven't seen big power from that. I know guys like to talk about that, and they also like to talk about merge collectors and all kinds of double wazoo stuff on the headers. And possibly it works. And I've seen some really crazy stuff with headers. Testing at West Tech, especially on big blocks. We've had really big name guys come in with headers that cost a lot of money, like more than a car, and run them on the dyno, and then we put the chassis or the dyno, the engine dyno headers that we have that are just nothing special. And these guys really had to work to make more power with their $8,000 or $10,000 headers to match what these just simple, easy, bolt together kind of dyno headers did. So, and they had all of the tricks. They had merge collectors and step headers and all kinds of cool stuff, and all the calculations for how big the tube should be and where the bends should be and where the length should be and all that stuff. And it just didn't do what the other headers did. So I'm not saying that stuff doesn't work. I'm just saying it doesn't always work. A K-swap in the Nova would be really cool. And that would be awesome, and it would really make people upset, which is cool. I'd also like the 3800 in the Nova, and the thing that should go in there is one of the Atlas motors, an inline 6, because there was an inline 6 in that car to begin with. So another turbo inline 6 would be awesome. Extrude on a stock 5.3 truck intake man. You want to extrude on a stock plastic truck manifold? Yeah, Guatney has the rod mod stuff. I've just never tested one of those. I guess I should probably send one in and see what the deal is. Oh, and Nash Metropolitan with a big block. See, that's cool. That's like a zinger, but that's not for me. I don't want something that's. I want something that just drives around and looks cool. And I probably would put a turbo on it. Just not that I would need the power, but just because it needs to have that on there when you open the hood. It can't just be a regular cool looking twin cam. Although twin cam with like side draft stack injection would be cool. That looks awesome on those cars. But some kind of turbo manifold would be also awesome. All right, Julius, be safe. James, what's up? Okay, let's see what James has to say. What Jeff wants to know what the weather's like in California. It was like 65 or 70 today. Short sleeves, hiking up, short sleeves, hiking up in the mountains. Okay, James, how do you think an LSA blower will compare to the Cadillac Northstar blower? I honestly think the LSA blower has more power potential than this Cadillac blower does. I'm only kind of guessing at that based on what I've read about the LSA stuff. This Cadillac blower is not designed to make lots of power. It was on a moderately powerful application. It's sized and packaged to fit where they needed it to do that. It's not the ultimate supercharger. It's an M122. It's an early version, so it's not even a revised version like the LSA is. It has a different rotor pack. It has a lot of things going against it. I think the LSA would make more power. I just think, like is usually the case, I think that the LSA stuff just costs more too. But I think you'll be happy with the LSA blower. You can do there, and there are lots of mods that you can do to make it better. Guys can port those, and there's obviously pulleys for them and nitrous lids for them, which is kind of awesome. All of that stuff is good. So if you want more power, there's definitely more power to be had. Hey Richard, have you done any manifold to headers on a 6-liter? Have I tested the 1 hour garage? Have I tested NA stock exhaust manifolds to headers on a 6-liter? Yes, I have. We've done that lots and lots. What brackets you use for the supercharger? If you're talking about the mounting brackets, the brackets were from the guys for the blower. The brackets were from the guys at Mac Daddy Parts, the adapters. If you're talking about the brackets for the power steering, water pump, all that stuff was factory. I have a 5.3 assembly that we got from the wrecking yard, and I run that on the accessory test, and we just bolted that on. The guys from Mac Daddy Parts sent they sent another spring-loaded tensioner, and I think it's from somebody else. I think somebody else makes it, then they source it, and then they sent another idler, I think. And other than that, all of the stuff was where it is from the factory. You just have to have a different belt also. Yes, Aaron, you can run a blower on a Gen 3 LS without folding the rods. We made 1,300 horsepower. Well, we made 1,482 with the 6-liter Gen 3. So you have a long way to go with a blower before you have to worry about if you have the right tune and ring gap before you worry about hurting the rods even on a Gen 3 motor. Vermont. Yes, 440 stuff is coming. As a matter of fact, 440 and probably stroker 440. Twin turbo Gen 6 big block would be a good choice for the Nova. Yeah, it would be the Mutter Nova. Novanda. Tim wants to know ARP install questions. I get a kit without instructions. I bottom the studs. You can bottom the studs, but you don't tighten them. You just screw them in till they're bottomed. You don't have to have a half turn out. You just screw them in, and we usually chase the threads, and then I put oil in because the holes in an LS are gonna rust on the iron blocks. Thread them in so that they go all the way in. Ours have a usually have the Allen on the top of the stud. We just put an Allen thing in and I just screw it in there until I feel resistance, and that's fine. I don't even measure them to make sure that they're all the same. If one of them is a half thread longer than the other, I don't care about that. We put them in and know it's not going to harm anything. Yes, the Northstar blower is the 2-rotor. Have you done dual plane versus single plane on a turbocharged application? Yes, it does exactly the same thing that it does in an NA application. And I also did it with a centrifugal blower. We did it with a Vortec as well. How would it do on porting the M182? I think it's going to help. I'm not going to get crazy about the porting because I just don't want to do that to that blower. It's not mine. What I'm going to do is open up the opening in the back of the blower so that I can put a 4-inch tube on it. We're going to make an adapter. I'll probably just have them, I'll have somebody 3D print that so it'll be plastic. And then we'll have a 4-inch opening, and then I can have a 4-inch tube, and I can have the 102mm throttle body. And I might even try shortening that thing and not have a bend in it like we had before. So I'll just have a short tube with the throttle body, 4-inch opening, and that should maximize as much airflow as we want to do. And I'm going to put it on a 6-liter and see. I want to see what the boost drop is going from a 400 horsepower 4.8 to a 500 or 520 or 30, whatever it comes out to be 6-liter. We'll see how much the boost drops. And before everybody gets up in arms, it's not going to have the same heads. It's not going to have the same camshaft. It's not going to have any of that. I don't care. I'm not doing a back-to-back comparison. Same head, same cam, apples to apples, you know, apples to oranges. Guys are going to jump in. Instead, think about it like this. We're comparing the blower on a 400 horsepower motor, and then we're comparing that blower to a 500 or 550 or whatever the number turns out to be. And that's the test that I want to do. I want to see how much the boost drops, which will be a good thing because it'll lower the charge temperature. It is a, James, it is a too low rotor. Yes, and Jason, boost makes everything better. 8 minutes left. Yeah, don't torque the studs in. There's no reason to tighten them that tight. Yeah, Dan, those Honda Accord Sports with the 2-liter turbo motor in them, we've got a guy that comes into Westech that has one, and especially with the E85, they're pretty sporty. Go for Brokes in the house. Were you ever able to test the Kenny Bell Blowzilla? Yeah, I've tested on a number of different applications. We tested that when it first came out way back in the 5-liter days, and because they call that same thing that save inlet on lots of different ones. And I've run the Kenny Bell stuff on everything, a 5-liter Ford, an LS, a Hemi, basically the Coyote. We've tested them on everything. What connecting rods would you use to step up from a Gen 4 LS rod? There's lots of aftermarket rods, and given the fact that we made 1,550 horsepower with a stock Gen 4 rod, any aftermarket rod that you get is going to be a step up from there. So I don't know how much power you're trying to make, but the Pro LS stuff from Summit, Wiseco makes good stuff, K1, Carilla, we've used their Bullet Series stuff. There's lots of good stuff out there. Drew, I thought we already told you what the power number is going to be. Oh, an LS1, 224 cam, 260, 243 heads, and LSA charger. Depends on the boost level, but figure that the supercharger is going to add, depending on your boost level, between 150 and 200 horsepower. A 224 cam LS1 with stock heads with a 243 head on it is going to be, I'm thinking that's going to be 400 and probably less than 500 horsepower, 475 horsepower. And then 575, you know, low to mid 600s with a reasonable amount of boost from that blower. Rob Vandermeer, what are your thoughts on headers over log manifolds on a twin charge system Whipple 2.9 with a Garrett? So are you running turbos blowing into the Whipple, or are you running 2 of those Whipples, which I've also seen on big block stuff? Oh, so you're running a Garrett 555.3. I think you're going to have more than enough power with either one of those. If you're, again, I don't know what you're trying to do with that. Headers on that application, if you're trying to map both of those things out, will make power. Is there any difference on intercooler versus non-intercooler? HCI, HC1? What's an HC1? But yes, there's always a difference between intercooling and non-intercooling. Upgrade mine. Problem is, I found out I have a 230. Is it worth upgrading or swapping to an LS? You can swap to an LS, and ultimately that will make more power. It doesn't have quite as much cool as a turbo 230 does, and you can certainly do that. Or you can do that cheaply if you already have a 230 that's running. You could do a turbo blow through on your with an easy turbo mount on it and blow through the 230 with an air-to-air intercooler. You can blow through a carburetor, and that works really good. And that will get you by for a long time, save up your money, put an LS in it. It's going to be more involved to swap an LS in it unless you just do a simple carbureted version. And then Matt Happel over and all the people over at Sloppy will yell at you for putting a carburetor on an LS. Turbo into a Whipple or Mercedes 5.4, that would be good, except you'd want to do twins into that. Go for broke. We've run the Dodge whole set stuff before. Hot mess. Just send me an email to remind me, because I get lots and lots of them. So and after I get off of here, I may forget. Oh, it's a 12 valve pre 90-3. Okay, Dodge truck, an HC1 turbo. Intercooling is always a good idea, and on the diesels, it's just going to allow you to adjust other things. And a lot of guys put intercoolers on there just to bring the EGTs down, especially for towing, because if you monitor that, sometimes it will surprise you. I've never tested any VGT turbos. I've done the variable vane stuff way back on the Dodge when they were doing them. But we had problems with some of those when we really tried to get after them. They tended to break. Shorty headers or long tubes on a GM. Well, if you saw the test that we just ran, you have to decide whether that's worth it. It was about 15 horsepower on the supercharged application on the 4.8. It'll be a little bit more on a 6-liter if you are making more power. But is that worth what the headers bring with them? The cost, and some people don't like them because they make different noises, and some people don't like them because they tend to leak, and so you have to deal with all of that stuff. Yeah, flat plane crank is never going to happen. I have a car that has a flat plane crank in it already. Let's see, I'm building some stupid stuff. Have you ever tried to run a TBI with port injectors as well? You can do that, and I think that the guys from Engine Masters or I think Brule tried doing that, and they were trying to find out if they could. And it might have even been on the Supercharged application. They were trying to find out if they could get a ratio, a balance between how much fuel they put into the blower to get the cooling and lubrication that they needed, and then get the port injection and try to optimize the cylinder flow, because they had 802s in it. But I don't think it worked out that well. I don't think that they were able to get a big power difference like they were hoping for. More power as a 2.6 Kenny Bell. That thing can make a lot of power on a small block Ford. Wow, that's going to be a lot. Because the problem with the small block Ford Kenny Bell kits, and I was just talking to Jim last night about this. He said that lots of guys are buying the small block Ford stuff, and that's the one kit that he has that's not intercooled. Oh, you have an air to water intercooler on it? That will be cool. Let me know how. I want to see a picture of how you integrated that. Any suggestions on a place to put together a custom set of fuel rails? You can make those yourself. You can buy fuel rail stock and you can drill it. They have extrusions that are already done, and you can put the injector holes anywhere that you want. So you can make your own. It's not that hard. Okay, it's time. I'm calling it. I have to get going. It's time for me to do lots and lots of other stuff. I'm doing I think I'm doing a story on the testing that we did with the 4.8 and the Cadillac Supercharger, and then I have to get ready to do the video for tomorrow, which I'm going down to. I'm taking a road trip, so you guys will see that. I'm going to do a road trip to go down and pick up a 1957 347 Pontiac V8 and a Leaning Tower Power, a Dodge Slant 6, thanks to my buddy Bob, who's helped me out with lots of stuff. And he has an LT1 that we're going to do some stuff with. So we'll upgrade that and show how much power we can get from LT1 stuff. And that will be awesome. And thanks, Bob. So I'm heading down there early tomorrow morning, doing a road trip, doing an up and back, so I can get back and hopefully post up my road trip video and show you a lot. He has lots and lots of cool stuff. He has lots of Model A stuff that they race. And so we're hopefully going to run some of those on the dyno, which will be awesome. I've never done that. The other thing that he has, and I'm very excited about this, because when I was looking up, going down the rabbit hole into the Pontiac thing for the 347, they had intake manifolds. So I was looking at all the available intake manifolds for the Pontiac, and they have intake manifolds for these early Pontiacs that had 6 Strombergs on it. And as luck would have it, Bob, who is awesome, who's all kinds of different awesome, has Strombergs, has 6 of them, and they're all the same. So it's possible that I could buy a 6 Stromberg intake manifold and run all these Strombergs on there. Now, I don't think that they're going to work very well, but it's going to look really cool. And they have dual 4-barrel cross rams. They have single 4 barrels. This motor right now has a 2-barrel on it. And a lot of guys don't know that in 1957 was the first year of the tri-power. So I'm going to try to get a tri-power intake for it. And they also had factory fuel injection. It wasn't the same as the Rochester stuff on the Chevy in 1957 on the 283. On this 347, they had a different version from Pontiac, and they only made about 4 or 500 of them because it was very expensive. And the intake manifold is an even longer runner deal. It's pretty cool. I saw a bunch of pictures of them, and I can't get a hold of one of those because those are way, way out of my budget. But it would be cool to have one of those and run a test on it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for showing up. I will see you tomorrow.